are now listening to the Come to the Table podcast with your host, Sean McCoy, where each week he invites a guest and welcomes them to the table to discuss any and all topics. First and foremost, Christians are called to love all people, and one of the best ways to love them is to sit down, talk with them, and listen to what they have to say. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
All right, here we are for the first review episode. I think we don't know what we're going to call it, Doug.
Well, review works.
Review for me.
Someone email a better name than the review episode.
Yeah, because it makes it sound like you're in school. Like, we're going to review.
Yeah, I already heard everyone go, "Oh, next episode." They just clicked it. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Yeah. So if you can just let's give us a few more minutes. The idea behind this, as we told you in the origin episode, I'm having my friend and pastor Doug Robinson. Thanks for coming back, Doug.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
I know the ladies are happy. I have to say, I did hear from more than one person, hey, that guy Doug, he's got a voice for radio.
Well, I also have a face for one too, so I will take the voice compliments. Thank you.
And we were laughing about this earlier, that it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he has a really nice voice, period.
No comma.
No comma.
At the end of that. Ask my wife. No comma at the end of that.
But yeah, so you get to hear the soothing sounds of Doug Robinson. So we're going to go through, and as we reflect on the first 5-6 episodes, if you include the origin one.
Sure.
And as we talked a little bit before this, just as a side note, this has been an incredible journey. I'm telling you, this is your host, Sean McCoy. I'm just so humbled and amazed and grateful
sure.
for just what has been an really incredible journey. And as I told you, kind of careful what you wish for.
Right.
And I was telling Doug not only about what we've gone through with the first 5, but what has transpired during that time, what is coming. And all I can ask you to do is hold on, and here it comes. There's some really amazing conversations coming, and I feel that some amazing conversations have happened.
Absolutely.
Part of our goal here is to challenge and ask people to step out of their comfort zone a little bit, maybe.
Right.
And I can tell you already, I know of at least a handful of people that have come to me as an aside, friends of mine, people that I know, obviously, and said, hey, this episode here challenged me. Maybe they even had to stop listening. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of went back, and now they're pursuing. There was one around Jim's episode.
Yeah.
That around the penal system and the new slavery and all that stuff. And the gentleman that I was talking to said that he's going to go back and read a book about it. Now, he keeps hearing this, didn't think it was true, doesn't think that there's merit there, but now he's going to go back and read. And so in the essence of what we're trying, that is really,
right.
If that one person does that, and I'm not saying that because they will, they're going to completely change their mind, but at least they're challenging that, right?
Absolutely.
Kind of is that what you took from a lot of what you listened to in terms of the episodes? Yeah,
for sure. There were definitely moments of me nodding my head up and down, and then moments of me maybe nodding my head left and right. But yeah, no. What I was impressed by was just you've gone 5 for 5, where you've had like honest, respectful, loving conversation over an incredible array of topics already in the first 5, and has demonstrated that maybe the heart of this podcast is a good thing and is something that people are looking for. Even just demonstrated, and after a long conversation with people, I think a majority of the people that you've had on are not believers, not Christians.
No, out of the first 5, 3, so Larry, Kate, and Justin, are not Christians.
Yeah, and yet you said, hey, we like to end this podcast with a prayer. And maybe you edited it out, but I didn't hear mics thrown or headsets thrown. But they said, yeah, sure.
No, and even for the ones that are coming, because there's more people coming on that are not. So far, nobody said no. And even if they do, I think if it ever gets to that point, if somebody doesn't want to, we'll take it from there.
Sure.
And I think I hope that what they hear and what they feel from the conversation is, and we're definitely not, if I prayed for them and that, I hope, God, that you change their hearts and make them good Christians. I think that people might stop praying, and rightfully so. It's more for me just to be thankful around the opportunity for doing this, thankful for their time, and truly, like when somebody's traveling or somebody's going through something, or whoever they are, somebody like Justin, who I don't want him to suffer, any more than I want you to suffer.
Yeah,
we will and all that good stuff, but I don't expect or want that to happen to him any less or more than happened to you. Right. So I think there's hopefully some genuine aspects to that. I mean, there's always that part of it too, from a societal standpoint. And there's a big thing around the thoughts and prayer stuff that comes out every once in a while. People are like, oh, what good is that? And after a tragedy, in terms of preventing it, nothing. But in terms of helping empower people or hoping that they have the strength to get through something, I think is the big part of that. So let's just kind of dive back in. The origin episode is going to be a little bit unique in terms of this reflection, because we're not going to have this going forward. But I will say that I got universal feedback from that was all positive. People that appreciated, people that weren't sure and we did this on purpose, and I've seen this as a lot of value, and I ask people to start there when they ask me about the podcast. And I just say, go listen to that, and if it resonates, then keep listening. Mm-hmm. And so far, it's worked.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I'm glad to hear that.
So how was it listening to your voice on a podcast?
Yeah, so I have done some voiceover work before, so I'm used to hearing myself talk, unfortunately, because that's what I do for a living a bit. And but I kind of listened to it as tried to remove myself from going, that's me on there, and thought, I want to listen to this podcast. Right. Unbiasedly. I just really I'm excited about getting to these first couple of episodes. So
you've been through all this, and so I'm going through it now, where you hear tics that you have, and you hear certain phrases that you say over and over again, like "to be fair," and I was told that that's one of my favorites. And so for those that are listening, as you get to this podcast episode, understand from my perspective, I am trying very hard to become a little bit better on the mic. I hope that the authenticity or the realness of it, in terms of this is how I talk and how I sound, will not delay or keep. My worry is it keeps people from listening, and they get too wrapped up in hearing me say the same stuff. Sure. If you can get past that, we are continuing to work and continue to improve this. This has been a passion project. It's not what I do for a living, but I definitely want to improve that, and I'm trying to. And even the format of it and the length and stuff like that. It's a journey. Like you said.
Absolutely. I will say, so I listen to my podcasts at 1.5 speed minimum, and then sometimes I do the 2 times speed, just depending on how. So it does feel like you are like talking in slow motion right now. I've gotten used to the 1.5 speed Sean voice. So this is kind of interesting. I'll be honest about that.
Get on with it.
What is happening? Or why are we so slow? But man, as somebody who has words recorded and played back every once in a while, I can appreciate that. On learning the tics or saying, oh, why did I say it that way? Or, oh, I don't even remember saying that. Oh no.
Oh, yeah, there's one, so I have to say something. It's coming up. So it'll be the week after this podcast is released. It's one coming up about science, and with my buddy Hunter Motz. And in it, I say, it's the only time I've heard me say something that I kind of went, oh wow, I really don't want that to get too far. Well, there's another one, but I say something about that I don't believe in the theory of creation, or I don't believe in creation. Mm-hmm. And it was in the context of if I'd had a chance to keep going, I do believe that God created everything in regards to the process. Yeah. And I also believe that evolution happens or can happen as a result of that. So I just I thought about, I'm going to wait till that episode and then we'll go back. I want to plant the seed now. So if you hear the episode next week, I'll say that. You can still send me the emails and ask me and blame me as a heretic or whatever. That's great. Understand that that's not exactly what I meant. Yeah. And even if you do hear me say something, this is just an opportunity for me to ask you, and I could be wrong totally, and that's fine too. Understand, I'm not trying to promote a point of view either way, and there has to be an opportunity for us to have conversation, so that we can grow and go from a mindset to another. There was a time in my life where lots of things I had thought about now. That's true. I would have told you or a joke. So sure. So allow for that. Just give me that, and in the spirit of my friend Jim Burgoon, who told me at the same time, hey, if that's not good enough for you, and oh well. Yeah. So there you have. So let's run through. So origin episode. Anything? Did you hear anything from anybody on that episode?
No, just like you said, positive feedback and excitement over hearing some conversations.
Yeah, I heard things like that. I heard that it was needed. So if you know anybody, I'd point them there in terms of an episode to listen to, or any of the other ones is fine. And then, of course, we start out with Big Jim. Yeah. As far as the first one, just jump right into the whole race thing. And as you were listening, what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, so I know Jim. He's a friend of mine, and he and I have had some private conversations about that very topic, and so was really excited to just kind of listen in on a conversation that I've had with him in the past, and just love his heart, love his willingness to share and to speak truth, but to speak truth in a loving way and in a way that makes you want to listen, and I don't think it's a surprise then you have a friend who said, man, I had to turn off the podcast, but now I'm going to go read. And I think that's a demonstration that's a result of Jim's heart and his willingness to love somebody who may disagree or not understand his perspective. when I was listening to the podcast, one of the things that really, really stuck out to me was at the hour and 12-minute mark, the discussion around bigotry, the discussion around the Confederate flag, and our response, and kind of this desire to punch or be violent or in response to people who want to wave the flag or be bigots, and versus the response of inaction and silence and tolerance of others, which is really interesting. We're recording this on MLK Day.
I was getting ready to say,
and this last week I got to read through again the letter from a Birmingham jail, and he talks about within his own community, he's dealing with this idea of, man, justice isn't coming, so let's flip the table, or intolerant, or just like we're hopeless. And then his question to white Christians is, will you stop being just intolerant or be patient or whatever, but rather, step into this, put it into action. Yeah, with me.
As a Christian instead of as a white Christian. And you actually, so I'll give a little side plug. So yesterday was, you gave a sermon in our church, and that was absolutely wonderful. And you read from the letters of the Birmingham jail that he wrote. And I remember you showed an image of him, and it was when he's in jail and he's looking through the bars. And all I could think about was Paul. As I was sitting there, kind of that same, in terms of being in that position, locked up, jailed, restricted for something like that, and then in having the grace to go outward in that sense and say, here's how I'm going to react to that. So back to the original point was, because I see Nazi flags and Klan robes, and my first reaction isn't to be loving, and I think that's where a lot of the struggle is. There was something that was there was a Twitter video, something was shown, maybe it was Instagram. It's like up in Seattle, some guy was walking around with a swastika on his arm. Yeah. And it got around, it was kind of what they were calling the alt-left, or whatever you want to call it, Antifa, I think Antifa group. And they filmed this guy basically confronting this guy, and he just knocks him out. Yeah. Knocks him out cold. And there's a group that's kind of like, hey, and there's a part of me that's, I don't know if I feel, there's part of me that doesn't feel sorry. If you're going to walk around with a Nazi emblem on your shoulder, then you're kind of, are you inviting that? And then I struggle it goes back to my Christian faith, is that going to do anything? Is that guy going to be any less a Nazi? Right. Because you decked him. Right. And then I think about people like Daryl Davis, and then how do we handle that? It goes back to that core part of it around what do we do and how do we handle bigotry? Because it is, it creates that emotional reaction. Your first thought isn't to have a conversation. Right. Your first thought is to converse in another way. Right. And if I knock their head off, then maybe they'll get it eventually. Yeah, yeah. So, and that does work to an extent. I was in the military. You can put enough pressure on people in certain ways to get them to believe just about anything or act a certain way and do a certain thing. And so I understand that mantra, but in terms of a lasting change, or even, because that's what you're really fighting, is that ideology. So it's so I thought it was, and I was thinking about his whole conversation. It was the first one, trying to get through this, and how do we do justice to the idea of the podcast, and how do we do justice to an open conversation. Part of that was on this end, was definitely part of that in regards to the episodes. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot better once I listened to it. I thought where we were talking, I think I told you, I was like, oh no, we're gonna kind of, I felt like we're so far at some point that we were so far off that I wasn't sure. But then went back and listened. It's kind of this trust thing. You have to trust that the guy's got his hand in this, and that the intentions are right, and when they are, it'll resonate. And then I had some good feedback around it as well. Yeah, absolutely. And again, and I think what in the ways that kind of Jim challenged me, I'm a white guy, and I think he really challenged me to move past inaction, to move past that's a problem in the world, but what are you going to do? And I'm going to be a typical pastor here, and I've got a Bible verse. No, so I apologize. It's everyone else can go, yep, if you're playing bingo at home, did the pastor mention a verse? Put that one in. But in 1 John, it talks about, for this is the message you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Unlike Cain, and so there's a story in the Old Testament of Cain and Abel, and Cain kills his brother Abel, and the text says, why did he murder him? Because his deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers and sisters. So there's this notion that the way I actually testify to what I think Christ has accomplished in my life is in the way that I love my brother and sister. And
Dr. King, at the end of his letter from a Birmingham jail, he ends it with this attitude of love towards his white brothers who have written him a letter asking him why he's doing what he's doing. Jim demonstrates his love by coming on this podcast and talking respectfully and fairly, but expressing it. And I think what he invited me to do is to say, hey, Doug, man, if what I'm saying is true, if the black community is suffering as he's describing and going through things that you as a white man will never understand, then the best way that I can demonstrate who Christ is in my life is by loving Jim, is by engaging, is by saying no to, it's a problem, but what are you going to do? But and that may be picking up a book, that may be listening to this podcast, that may be starting even simpler as that. I'm not going to dismiss what Jim has to say, right. But if he's a brother of mine in Christ and he's saying that these are some things that are happening, then my response is to not just like think nice thoughts, but to act in love, and that's going to be how I demonstrate both my love for him and the love that I've experienced and received in Christ.
What you said reminds me of not only that episode, a little bit of one because Larry's is obviously in the same vein.
Absolutely.
But also some that are coming that I know of already without trying to put too far of a seed planting as the episode's coming. Because we're going to talk about this again. And that's another thing, is there's a little bit of fatigue factor I know for some people that
sure.
I heard that from some others, like, I don't want to talk about race anymore.
Yeah.
And I understand that and I get that, but I think it's crucial to continue to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
I know in my own life, I have to continually have conversations around things that I struggle with, even if I don't like it. So I don't, we're not going to become the race podcast.
Sure.
But we're definitely going to talk about it when we get a chance.
Yeah.
And try to do so. And so you asked about what you could do about it, and you mentioned listening to podcasts or reading a book. I would also say, in the essence of what we're doing, and we say this a lot, but again, I'll put it out there. Sit down and talk to somebody.
Sure.
I've never sat down and talked to Jim about race.
Yeah.
Larry, who was on the last episode for this series or for this group, I've known him 31 years in a sense. We've been disconnected over the years because we were away from school, but even in the last year or 2 years on Facebook, there's opportunity for communications. We actually had one phone call, but I've never called him and just said, hey, let's talk about it. And I talk about all my friends all my black friends, or even my Hispanic friends. Have I ever really done justice and sat down and listened to what they had to say versus trying to either reiterate what I thought I knew,
right,
or to your point before, just basically saying I'm sorry or that really sucks. Oh well,
right.
That's not really, that's that inaction part of it that is just saying, man, I don't like it either.
Yeah.
And then going about my day.
Right.
So then the other side of that is you want to be. So where's the engagement start, stop, and to what degree do we do that? Do I become this advocate and that takes over your life? I don't think we're saying that. I think we can make it somewhere in the road of just having a conversation. If you've never had a conversation with someone who's different from you around an and just ask what their experience are, I'd start there. Yeah, I really, really would. And there's one coming out. I'll go ahead and we'll plant a little bit of a seed. There's a friend of mine, David Sachs, who I think is going to have an incredible. There's going to be at least 2 episodes with him, and I think it's very important that we do so because he really goes into this idea. And he had this multi-year journey of what do I do about this? Mm-hmm. And he's not a pastor, but he's just a convicted as a human being and as a Christian. What do I do about this particular issue? And so he started with this, just having a conversation, going to coffee, and listening. And so I would just say, if any of this compels you around Jim's episode and around Larry's episode, then I'd have and I would even, if I can say this on the other side, that if you're the Larry or Jim in the story, have you had a conversation with somebody that you knew, other than that echo chamber on your side?
Right.
Because it is. I did feel that was one of the interesting things. I don't know if you caught this too, not to jump into Larry's, but I felt even though 2 completely different people, but I kept hearing the same things. Mm-hmm. Right. And what stood out to me a lot between their 2 stories were specifically around the Michael Browns and the Philando Castile stories, that they really didn't see them as one. And I thought that was really important. It was one of the things that it helped me open my eye a little bit. Yeah. In terms of how I viewed that, where I see each one of those as individual stories. Mm-hmm. Because you can look at Michael Brown's actions, they were not the same thing as Philando Castile's. So I think we look at it like, well, what did Michael Brown think was going to happen? We look at Philando Castile and go, man, that shouldn't have happened. Versus they look at it as one big, it's just a continuation of the injustice. Right. Is what I got from it.
Right.
which, as we were talking about earlier, really is about power and control. Because one of the things, one of the things they kept saying was, and you hear this a lot, they, who's this they?
Yeah.
And so who's the they in the story is those that have the ability to make influence or instill power and push that power out based on their authority, whether it's government or inside of an organization or anywhere else. If you're hiring somebody, you have that power and authority and control, and what are you doing with it? Yeah.
And that's, and that's, man, power and race. These are topics that have been around forever. I mean, and what's really interesting about the Bible is, man, race comes up consistently as a positive, good thing. At the end of the Bible, there's a picture of the heavens praising God, and it talks about the writer says, "I could see the nations." So it's not like race is going away. In fact, it's part of God's beautiful design. We think God designs every person, and He's designed us to look different, and that will be reflected in the kingdom that is to come. Paul will get on to another varsity level Christian, Peter, about how he has used race to step away from the gospel. And so, man, the Bible is so explicitly clear that it's unity through diversity. And it's unity through being brought together through Christ. And so if my family is diverse in race and my family is hurting, man, then I'm going to step into that. I'm going to try and do my best to love them well and hope and know that they'll do the same thing. And I heard that in both the podcasts, albeit one from somebody who is a Christian and one from somebody who isn't. But yeah, no, I love that invitation to step in and understand the hurt and pain, and participate in the eradication of that. That's a beautiful, beautiful picture.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I remember from Larry's stories and what he was telling us about what he thought that it was that pain. It was the fact that there was a hurt there. There was there wasn't this desire to be exclusive because he was born with different skin color than I was. He found, and he talked about the Hagler boxing match, and he was a kid, and he's like, children are innocent. You're watching this guy on television, and he wins this boxing match, and it's just a straight, pure boxing match, and he wins, hands down. And as a result, and then when your dad tries to explain that what it is that's really going on, isn't just that they're upset that he won, but they're upset even more so because of this. And I think we have to be, I'll use it, we have to be fair to that situation and say, if you go back and look historically, especially on certain situations, I was reading about Jack Johnson, speaking of boxing, and if you read articles that were written in the Times in different places, if you don't think that the color of his skin made an impact on what he was doing, I would just invite you to go back and read it. And if you really read what's being said, oh my gosh, man, it was all about him being black. Yeah. And we see, and I think we see that today, and Larry and I mentioned it a little bit around the boxing between McGregor and Mayweather. Yeah. Where I felt like I was supposed to root.
Right.
And McGregor's Irish. I mean, right? That's right in my quote unquote wheelhouse, because I'm supposed to be Irish.
Right.
And all this other good stuff, and I'm white. Well, I'm supposed to root for McGregor. And here's this guy Mayweather. I just want him to pound him in the ground, and they're stoking this fire. Mm-hmm. And I found it very standoffish and but it's easy to get. I understand why people got wrapped up in it at the same time.
Right.
So, but to your point, I think to me that's where the gospel comes down. As all nations, the gospel doesn't. I mean, it identifies that people look differently, but at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, God sees us all the same, and that's all that matters. Yeah. So there's the two. We can come back to a little bit of those if you want. We actually, so the ones in the middle between those, obviously we had Kate's episode around Me Too, and then we had Justin's and Joey's, which I'm not even sure where to start. Just three great ones, and I'll tell you what really made him great on this end, to kind of throw a little bit of shade on the pulled the veil back a little bit. So Kate, I know I've never met Kate.
Yeah.
It just was on my heart to talk to her about it. I know lots of women. I could have chosen lots of people to start that episode with, and I chose her for a couple of different reasons. One, she's in this group. It's a Mixed Mental Arts. It's another podcast. I've become a huge fan of other podcasts. I want to promote other podcasts. I suggest everybody listens to them. We're going to have other people from other podcasts on. I think this is why. I think there's a part of this push from an evolution standpoint of information and where we're being heard and what we're listening to. podcasts, I think, are becoming more and more popular because of this. Because
Sure.
I think and they should. So go out there and listen, and I encourage you to find things to listen to and about. And so Kate, I just felt on my heart, and I thought it was brilliant because it wasn't like some over the top, crazy kind of woman's story. But I think it was enough to show that even on the small level,
Sure.
Working at a pizza stand, that if it was that significant on just a simple level as working at a Pizza Hut when she's 15,
Mm-hmm.
if it's there, then where else is it?
Right.
This isn't just a couple of women who got treated poorly and got upset about it.
Yeah.
And if I took a step and I was listening to her and I thought, wow, that would have been at 15, that would have been uncomfortable.
Sure. Absolutely. I was grateful for her honesty, and yeah, I think what you're saying is true, that there was not a need for a explosive quote unquote story and in some ways it was incredibly helpful for me to hear a story of, when I was on the headset, the pilot would say, how about you smile for me before I go? And I love how you said, you were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not said in other instances. And it was just this, or again, another instance. And what was interesting to me was the moments that she brought up were always isolated. So it's in a private conversation between a pilot and someone on a headset. It's in a private conversation between her ordering a pizza and her manager, and her request to don't send that guy. And of course, it's that guy that shows up at her doorstep. Then compare that to in the openness of a community in the break room. Honestly, for me, probably a bigger scale of they would figure out a way to put pornography on the television.
Innovation.
Yeah. Way to use your talents and energies. Well done there. But in those moments, she was actually the least worried, as she and others in the room, when it's out in the open, are saying, "Hey, turn that off," and it gets turned off. And
there's a thing, shame and silence, and if you it's kind of that's what the adversary, I will say, uses to kind of help us keep that in the shadows and keep us in the background. That it's a whole lot easier if it's just you on a mic and just right. Would he say that? Would you say that on a Sunday if Lisa gets up to sing? Would you be like, "Hey, sweetheart," before you start singing that solo? Right. Lisa McVeigh, who's got a wonderful voice, by the way, a little plug. Yeah. Hey, Lisa, and if there's no way you would ever do that in front of the congregation to say, "Hey, why don't you give me a little smile, there, Lisa?"
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. The Bible talks a lot about how we're a lot of people making up one body, and we all have different gifts and abilities. There's a story that even if you didn't grow up in church, you probably know of 4 friends who bring their hurting friend to see Jesus, and they put a hole in the roof and lower him down. And again, like one of the common themes I thought in these first 5 episodes, it's my wife was a kids minister, and so they always have like really great versions of Bible verses to help kids remember it.
Adults could use them.
That's the thing that I'm like, I remember that way better than the other stuff. And one of her big phrases was always, "Don't just talk about love, put love into action." And that really, the people in the break room didn't just talk about love; they put love into action. But I think the challenge that she gave to me was not like, so Doug, don't just wait for the pornography to come on the TV. Rather, how am I putting love into action without knowing the story? Because it's happening. It's happening in little ways. It's happening in big ways. And again, I love, she wasn't saying, "Hey, like, because I'm weak and I need the help," or whatever. But if I don't want to just talk about love anymore. Right. They really have challenged. "Hey, Doug, how are you putting love into action in regards to the Me Too movement? Hey, Doug, how are you putting love into action in regards to racial inequalities? Hey, Doug, how are you putting love into action around people who are having out-of-body experiences?" I didn't even know that was a podcast. Then I'm listening to it, but it is. How am I putting, and again, for us, right, for Christians, love isn't an ethereal idea. Love is in the face of Jesus. So we believe it's embodied and demonstrated in his sacrifice for us. But how am I putting the love of Christ into action? It's demonstrating, it's moving me, it's energizing me, it's compelling me to act. And then more so, am I waiting for Philando Castile video and then I'm going to put love into action? Am I waiting for a hashtag movement and putting love into action? Or am I hearing these podcasts and having them say, "Okay, whoa, I don't need to wait. I can put love in action today and meet it before the incident occurs.
And I would even add to that a bit that it's not that you have to be a Christian to put love in action.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite Bible verses, Galatians 5:22-23, and it tells you the fruits of the Spirit. And the part that I always loved about it, because it says all the things that people would normally agree with around gentleness and kindness and love and patience and self-control and all the things that in my life that I've seen typically in a situation that's gone wrong or situations where I don't do those things. But the last sentence says, against such things there is no law.
Mm-hmm.
And that sentence is what slammed it home for me. But around that, most people aren't going to argue with you.
Right.
Even an atheist isn't going to say don't love somebody.
Right.
They're not going to argue with you and say no. Don't do that. Don't be loving in that situation. Mm-hmm. And I think to round that off just a bit, and I said it in the podcast and about asking my wife around it. I mean, when's the last time that you asked somebody? When's the last time you heard them again tell their version of the story? And as I heard her stories again, it wasn't huge. It wasn't this ultra oh my gosh moment of here's of some weird kind of crazy Harvey Weinstein situation, mm-hmm. but it was enough that hopefully got your attention.
Yeah.
Because I don't think any 15-year-old girl should have to deal with that.
Right.
Because and what's the big deal there? I'll just say go do a little bit more homework and find out that there's other stories that start out that way that end up with somebody being stalked or ends up with somebody being physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, right. and even murdered. I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but that is the first step in that.
Sure.
And there isn't a 30-something-year-old man should not be. Right.
Right.
Not to be absolute, and maybe I'll get in trouble. That's fine. But I don't see why if you're 30-something years old and you're telling some 15-year-old girl at a Pizza Hut that you don't barely know,
right.
that she's the only person in this world for you.
Yeah, not okay.
Probably not okay. Probably not okay.
And I think, yeah, and that's the thing. It's the question that pops into my head. And I don't know her obviously, but I'm so grateful that she came on the podcast and just shared these stories from her life. She opened up to us. She didn't owe us that, but she decided to. What 15-year-old girl's on the phone today who could use a break room full of people to go, nope, right, turn that off? No,
very, very much so, especially now with the way things are with technology and the ability to interact even easier. And it's not that I think anybody's less or more depraved or whatnot or has the opportunity, but there's more and more opportunities for that to happen.
Right.
And to your point, what actions are we taking
right.
to do something about that? So, yeah, great. So, never heard of out-of-body experience? Never had really...
I've never had one and never heard of out-of-body experiences. But here's where, just come to the table, baby. Just come to the table. Because I've only heard of them in snippets and then dismissed. And so what did the podcast allow me to do? To sit and really listen to somebody who's had these experiences in his life. And again, like I think a dead guy came back to life. So if I'm willing to believe these kind of things, I should give the ability to allow them to speak about having these out-of-body experiences. And again, what it helped me do, and this will kind of come up in the that fourth podcast dealing with PTSD, is it moved the topic from an idea to a person. It moved the conversation from a 140-character tweet that I can just scroll past because I'm going to read 2,000 of them, to a person who's got a wife and kids and a story and has a childhood and has moved places and served in the Navy and did all these things. And part of his story is this. And so I don't know, to attach the idea to the person helps, obviously, this makes sense, but helps me see the person. Mm-hmm. And helps me hear the idea through their lens. Now, again, I haven't had an experience, and I didn't turn off the podcast and sit down in my room and really hope for one. But yeah, I don't know. That was a really neat experience.
It was, and it was one of those that I'd read his thesis before. I remember it's probably 3 or 4 years ago when he first put it out. And like anything else, it was one of those opportunities to hear somebody's story around something like this and kind of just give them credence for what it is they experience. And it didn't have a huge impact on me. And as I was reading it again before him and I got on the air, it's a bit of a mea culpa, and I apologize, Justin, if you're listening, but I don't think I read it all the way through the first time, or I didn't remember, because the one part that stood out to me, and I said it and I'll say it again, was that definitely that common ground that we had, that in the middle of this story, and I remembered the first part of it and having the UFO sighting with his buddy, and of course the part of the Navy stuck out to me because I was on the ship with him.
Right.
I was there.
It's wild.
As he's going through this. So there was a little bit of a interesting connection for me personally, obviously, in that experience. And so I thought that was very interesting. That in amongst all this, and he starts talking about science, starts breaking things down, going through all these. That right in the middle of this, I felt like in the middle of this, of his theory, in the middle of his paper, is this concept of love, which is, as I see it, not a very scientific thing. You can't measure it, you can't quantify it. We all know it's there, but it's not something like light or energy or pounds or air. It's not something we can measure and put a label on or break down and see what it's made out of. But that it was, and then it becomes the quintessential part of it. And when I even asked him what his faith was, he said the evolution of love. And I thought, well, man, not sure this experience is different than mine, and I alluded a little bit to some of my thoughts around that on a personal level. But here's this common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to. I'm not trying to hijack his thesis here, but one of the tenets to the Christian faith is this idea of growth. The fancy church term for it is sanctification. Tim Keller, who's a kind of a famous pastor in New York, there's a doctrine of justification that we're saved by faith alone, but the way he says it is we're saved by faith alone, but not by a faith that remains alone. That it's a faith that is a journey where we long to. Now, for us, again, love is Christ, and so we want to look more and more like Him, behave more and more like Him, act like more, respond to situations more and more like Him. So where he says an evolution to love, okay, yeah, like part of the Christian faith is like, an evolution to Christ, if I could phrase it that way. And so the details we'll certainly probably disagree on, and I want to ask a couple questions, and I'm sure he'd want to ask some couple questions to me. But yeah, at the heart of it, I'm sitting there going like, this guy's giving a sermon on sanctification. Right. This is crazy. Right. This is amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Again, differences in some of the details, but my goodness, I'm not listening 30 minutes into the podcast to hear his heart to have people walk towards love if it's a tweet. I've scrolled past it and I've already dismissed it, but instead I'm seeing how we have this common ground. I'm seeing how we share a certain way to see the world and what we would hope for people. And all of a sudden now we've got a lot more in common than we have in difference. Do we have some differences? Yes, but we can have the conversation and go from there.
And I think in that context, I think where I get excited is because there's that natural proclivity to want to then turn around and go, okay, well, Justin, because you think of sanctification as a thing, let's go ahead and jump into the scripture and
sure.
Hey, I got this bucket of water, let's go.
Right.
Versus just being and loving and serving with Him and just and relishing in that connection for what it is at that moment. Yeah. And that's been a big thing on my heart around all of this, is around this of allowing people to have certain, because Larry said it in his, he said something about he made kind of a blanket statement around all police officers and they all get to go home, they all get paid leave, and I said, well, okay, well, and I knew when he was saying that, and I'm not breaking any bubble or saying anything that I didn't say to him on the podcast, that, hey, this isn't, no, there is that one. I remembered I'd just seen it.
Right.
What would you say to that? And it wasn't, because I think our tendency at that point for a lot of people is to go, well, see, Larry's totally full of it. He's not being objective. That's a completely untrue statement. But I thought his response to it was really even more telling than the fact that he had the facts wrong.
Right.
That really, in that, it didn't matter to him.
Right.
So if we go to the Justins and Larrys of the world as Christians right now, and I'll put this out there, and even if you're sitting there saying, hey, he is doing what the Bible says, or he's got something wrong, if we just take it to him and just shove it, that's
sure.
That's when I think it gets missed, versus just letting it be and continue to develop that relationship. And again, it's not to then turn around one day and kind of go, okay, well, hey, when are you going to finally come around?
Sure. That's
not for me to do. It's not for me to I'm not going to change his heart. No, people influence me. I know this because of my own story. People influenced me, but nobody looked at me and said, Sean, you'd better. There was not a person that did that.
Right.
So then I can't be that person.
Right. Well, and again, that's every person that's come on the podcast so far has not gone, whoa, wait, you're a Christian?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And so my assumption is if you come onto the podcast to talk about out-of-body experiences, you've probably had an out-of-body experience. I may not have had one myself, but I'm here to listen. And my guess is they can't come knowing, okay, so you're a Christian, and so you've like C.S. Lewis says that you've got to decide whether Jesus was a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. And so they probably know that you've landed on Lord, and so they come to the podcast, I'm assuming, knowing that you'd totally be down if they love Jesus. but they don't. But yeah, sometimes I think our assumptions or what we assume kind of end the conversation,
Right.
but in a lot of ways they've served as the catalyst of the gotten and as a result, you guys have had to have some really great conversations that we've all gotten to listen in on.
And as much as Justin has been a friend of mine for a long time, I felt the beauty of that conversation. I will say this: no, he didn't give his life to Jesus at the end.
Sure.
And I didn't change my mind. But for him and I feel much closer to him, and even in a short period of time, just felt so much now. I'd love to sit and have a beer with him and have a glass of wine, or sit somewhere around a campfire, and just continue, and not with any other purpose than just to get to know my friend and build that relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think that is really where, that's to me is that service aspect, serving others. And I don't mean by getting him a plate of cheese. I just mean like being with them in a relational part of it, and that's where I see the real essence of that going. Yeah. So I thought it was, and that's why we keep saying this, but I will encourage you not to do it just for the sake of it. I'm seeing it in people that I've known for a long time. Go out there and you're getting to know people, and you're challenging yourself. Find somebody else that you want to have a conversation with and go do it. Be part of this.
Yeah.
Be part of this, and not just from a listening standpoint, but from a you can be. And I'm really anxious to hear what other people come up with and what they see from this, and how they are able to use this as a hopefully as a catalyst to see that in their own lives.
Yeah. And
so into the we don't necessarily have to be the last one, but one we haven't talked about, which I have to say, the Joey Martinez episode about PTS. I know I said in the episode, but I want to reiterate what it was about. So I had one conversation with Joey. It was around business.
Mm-hmm.
It was through another group, the vet group that we're in for veterepreneurs, who are veterans or now entrepreneurs, and so it was this business decision. It was around nonprofits, and I gave him some advice and just kind of hit it off. And then we got into this conversation. He kept bringing up faith, and he started talking about PTS, and he started talking about this other stuff that's going on. And I just literally, and this is before we started recording this, I think I told you about this way back, like 6-8 weeks ago. There's something in my heart that said, have him on.
Yeah.
And I knew none of his story. And then he sat there, and I felt like I had just gone through that emotional roller coaster listening to him for so many reasons. A lot of them was because in our country today, we're very, very proud of our vets. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those you can't touch. It's a subject that very few people come to in any kind of negative ways, whether serving, especially what they've done. How many people now we see that are missing limbs and arms, and that's just the physical stuff. And then you have the mental side, the mental health side, which we talked about. You saw with the Joey episode. You can't ever touch that. But there is when you do serve, look, it's still run by people. It's still got all the opportunities for trappings and failures, and it happens all the time. And it's even more frustrating. It's almost like when a nonprofit cheats, or when somebody in the clergy or the pastor, when they do something wrong, it just amplifies that. But listening to what he went through, I found myself feeling an immense amount of sorrow for him, and it was so unfair. Mm-hmm. Not only and I understand this, and it happens when you hit some person at the computer going, "Hey, you didn't even serve." According to the computer, you didn't serve. Yeah. And he's sitting there going, "I'm going through daily. I'm trying to keep from jumping off of a cliff." Right. Literally. And he mentions that rope. When he mentions it, he's real subtle with it, one of his comments, and makes all that time about the rope, feeling the rope burn against his neck. And if you didn't catch that, I want you to go back and listen. He said that. Mm-hmm. Well, that wasn't a figurative reference. That is just I just wanted to just go scream, right? Yeah. I just wanted to find that. And that's me. And I'm hearing this for the first time, and he's lived this for years. He lived it. And then all of that. He goes, and if you listen to it, what I thought was so beautiful was he goes through all of it, and he continues story after story of just being homeless and and all this stuff, and just suffering and suffering and suffering and suffering. And you're thinking there's got to be a point. We know that people get pushed to this point now with the suffering from post-traumatic stress, not just for those that serve, but just in life. People give up and just kind of go, well, I'm out. Yeah. And then that 11th hour, he comes in with that Luke 12:22 verse, and I'm just like, whoa. Yeah. It floored me.
Yeah, it was a powerful. I keep using Christianese terms. I'm sorry. It was a powerful story. I was going to say testimony. It is a powerful story, and
but I think saying it as a testimony for him, I don't think is an injustice, because he's
sure, that's right. But and that's the thing, in this day and age and in this world, and it's certainly something that, man, I'm not throwing stones, because it's something that I struggle with, and people within the church struggle with. But there's just this notion that you have to have it all together. and you have to like, your life has to be perfect, and you got to post, like you got to retake the selfie 20 times because the light's just not right. And to have a guy come on and just, I mean, he just poured his heart out, right? Like, and he talked about the injustices done to him, and then he certainly was quick to say, man, I was drinking too much.
Mm-hmm.
I was angry. I was quick to respond with, I'm going to deck this guy.
Right.
And to lay it all out there was a powerful thing. You know, as Christians, we're called to pray for each other, to carry each other's burdens, to look out for each other. But in a world where none of us have burdens or shortcomings, because we're all perfect, we can't. And so for him to share his story, to me, I got to imagine just opens up opportunities for others to now trust him. By the way, the devil doc was in the title of, I hope that's on his business card, because that's so much cooler than, but to have a guy say, hey,
you know what that's from. So devil dogs is a nickname for Marines.
Okay.
It's one of the phrases you use. And so, because your doc is typically the slang term for corpsman or anybody on the medical side. You say, hey doc, especially a lot of your corpsmen, you'll hear him referred to as doc in some way. So he was the devil doc. It's a doc to the devil dogs kind of thing.
Wow. See, I didn't know that.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, for him to open it up, for him to talk about the literal rope around his neck, for him to talk about, man, my wife and I were separated for a couple of weeks. I mean, just what beautiful honesty that then allows, I'm sure, other people to step into his life and care, right? Like his mom took a big risk. He could have just said, no, I can't burden my mom with this. But he said, Mom, I'm going through this. I don't know what to do. She said, okay, great. Come and stay with us for a couple of days. But then now I'm sure on the flip side of it, and like he talked about, now he gets to step in and help other people as well. And so it really is just this, man, if we, like, I just wonder how different the world would be if we all just kind of were a little more willing to demonstrate what he did so beautifully and just say, yeah, I was ready to deck this person, or yeah, I was drinking a little bit too much, or I was at the end of my rope. I didn't know where else to go. It was the 11th hour. I can't imagine how much more than the opportunity is if people are ready to put love into action, that they go, ooh, okay, let's move in here.
Right.
Let's move in here. Let's move in here.
And what you said really resonated with me in terms of, if we don't have those burdens, then how can we share? And I think I shared it yesterday, that from 2 Corinthians, right? Mm-hmm. The part about sharing each other's burdens is the law of Christ.
Right.
And but without those burdens, right, what would we have to do?
Right.
If we're all sitting here, if we're waiting, and it's just, well, this person needs a burden, or hopefully you have an issue, Doug, and then I can then become a Christian.
Right.
And if we're all sitting, but we're not really honest and saying, hey, I am suffering. And it reminds me of there's a Halfway There podcast. I'll push it. So Eric Nevins has it. It's a guy that I met through one of the podcast groups, a gentleman out of Iowa, and he has 2 episodes that made me think about what you just said. Where there's one about, there's a guy who grew up as this poster boy for Christendom. I mean, he literally was on a poster with a halo on his head. And you go back and I invite you, and I'll put some stuff in the show notes. Go listen to that podcast, and he has this fall from grace and becomes part of the ministry, much like somebody like yourself, who's this expected to be more than what you are.
Sure. And
you're not allowed to have issues. You're not allowed to have struggles. And then all of a sudden, what do you do when you're the one?
Yeah.
And then he struggled with that. And I'm sure that all you guys struggle with that.
Absolutely.
In terms of that. And then the other one was a lady that was more of a volunteer, and it was a story. Her name was Rhonda. She's singing on the praise team, and she's having an affair, and there's other people on the praise team, and they all know it. And you see these girls, and they're up there singing every week.
Yeah.
We have a praise team.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this Sunday. I was like, I know.
Sure.
Don't relate inappropriately, because it's not happening. I mean, I say that with pretty good conviction, but let's say that it is.
That's right.
Well, let's say that it is.
Right.
Let's push this a little bit. So what if they are?
Right.
Do they now deserve to be scorned? I mean, and this is where I get really frustrated with the church. And this is where I will push back to my fellow Christians. And he even said it in Joey's episode, where he said there's people that are like, well, I don't know if they were Christians that said this, but people are like, well, you weren't really homeless.
Right.
And he's like, well, what? So I need to wait till I'm literally on the street.
Right.
I don't have a home.
Right.
I'm sleeping on my mom's couch. My wife is not here with my kids. I am homeless.
Right.
But in whether it fits some stupid definition, and I'm just going to say that, I don't care what your definition. Don't wait. Well, he's not really suffering yet. Stop trying to put a rank and file in suffering.
Right. Right.
When and then to your point about time, way back to the beginning, to tie this all in. So then we have to wait until that point. What point do we help?
Sure.
At what point do we jump in and say, let's do something? But let's alleviate this issue on some level. And
Yeah.
show some love and some compassion until waiting until, well, you're not quite suffering enough.
Right.
What's enough suffering?
Right. Right.
For us to then have to be Christians that I'm a call out there to the Christians, myself included. When does the time right?
Right.
Then now I have to care.
Sure. Well, and I think even for me, Joey encouraged, am I willing to, but am I the kind of, I know my wiring. I'm going to wait till I'm homeless and it's obvious that I'm homeless to admit that I'm homeless. But man, I imagine for these two other podcasts that you mentioned, that they didn't just like wake up one day and fall into the situation that they were in, that there were steps and warning signs. But again, no, we can't talk about that. And again, particularly Christians, we're the only people in the world that say there is a problem. It's called sin. There are consequences to these sins, but no one actually admit that we have one, right? Like it's a weird dichotomy. But man, he encouraged, like he said, you're probably going to question God and everything. I know I did. Oh, how refreshing is that? But how many times have I in my life said, man, I'm just in this season where I am questioning everything. But what an encouragement Joey gave to all of us to be open, to find a friend or two. Be sensitive to what you're talking about. But again, this idea of confession is so central to Christianity. Again, to become a Christian is to confess. But to walk as a Christian, to walk as a disciple of Christ, is to continually confess and to have people who are putting love into action, who you can trust and they trust you to say. So you can't go through seasons of, man, I was ready to deck this person, or hey, I could use your help, or man, I'm just in the season where I'm questioning God. So again, whether it was all your guests, we're willing to be open and to in some form or fashion confess experiences, feelings, past events, hopes that they have. And then on the flip end of that was somebody who's willing to listen and respond in love. Man, it's a beautiful thing. And again, I think that's why people are resonating and listening, and people are saying, and before we started recording, I got to hear about just a ton of more guests that are coming. And that's because I think they're responding to the environment that's set at this table. It's a beautiful thing.
And I thank God for that, because it's just such something that He put in my heart. And I couldn't have done this without His hand in all this. And I just am very humble. And to the last part, so it's a great segue into one of the ones that's coming too. A gentleman I talked to by the name of Hayden Bruce, and it's called we're calling it the evolution of faith. Yeah. And we talk about that. We talk about this need we have within Christianity. And I'll just say, and I would say with even within life, just if you're going to wrestle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay. You have to, you need to, you should. It's that churning. And we talk about it in next week's episode with Hunter in the scientific sense. That's really what science is breaking things and figuring out what the problems are, pushing what you know. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you have to push what you know to then completely can everything you've ever thought or what you believe in, or even what you feel to be is true. That's not, I think within our own Christian faith, what are those words saying when you read that? If you've read that verse over and over again, but you never quite understood what it said, if you don't go back and really, really read it and go, oh my goodness. And I'll plug another podcast that's coming up. It's my buddy, Pastor Smith, Gerald Smith, Biblical Elucidation. And he does a great job, snippets of just challenging you. Mm-hmm. Do you think you know what the Bible says? Sure. And we talked about it earlier, and I'm going to preface this a little bit. One that everybody hears all the time, money is the root of all evil. Money is the root of all evil. And that's not what the Bible says. Yeah. It doesn't say that. Yeah. It says for the love of, right? Where's your pride? Where's your focus? What are you serving? And there's some more that he's going to talk about. So there's people like that we're going to have on to turn and challenge this. It's not, we with our own community around the Christian faith, but even externally to say that, and hopefully there's what I hope people on the outside, if I can say that, see isn't just a bunch of people who are just like, well, Kate's problems would go away if she became a Christian. Right. And if Justin would just come, not just to the table, but hey, if you jump over the other side and go ahead and take a dip, that'd be great too. If they ever wanted to, or if anybody ever wanted to talk to me about whether that they should, or where they're feeling, or where they're going with that, I would love to have that conversation as well. But I'm not going to make it a requirement to have the first one. Right. But that has to be enough. I think there's a part of me that feels like, if this is blasphemy, you're here, you can throw a lightning bolt at me, it's fine. But I just don't want. I don't read that in the gospel that I have to then. Well, I got to convert them, and then it becomes legalistic and litigious. And now I'm like, okay, well, what can I do to kind of And you can have debates, and I'm all okay with that. There's some other podcasts I'm listening to that start talking about arguments, and that's fine, and that's great. But not for argument's sake.
Yeah.
And not because then if you try to create an opportunity for a result, if the only way this conversation is worth anything, if I measured the conversation with any of them as to whether or not they either are more or less likely to believe, even the ones that are believers, then I think that we're doing a disservice to what this whole thing can do.
Sure.
And what God ultimately wants us to do in terms of that relationship, in terms of that service. It's not what I don't know. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, man. It's good.
Well, hey, we're at 55. We could keep talking, but there you go. There's the first little recap. Got to bring in Doug.
Glad to be here. I'll
Awesome,
see you
man.
in
I love
a couple more episodes.
Yes. We're gonna keep doing this, and it's, hey, man, here we go on this journey.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, and well done. I'll speak for a lot of the listeners, and again, it's really great stuff. Challenging, encouraging. It's opening up my eyes to all kinds of different experiences and stories, and especially to the 5 that have come on. Thank you. I'll probably never, well, Jim, I know, but the other 4 will probably never meet you. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for coming on this podcast. It's been real.
But it'd be great if you ever got to, right? If I get to meet physically Joey and Kate and get to see my buddies again and seeing Larry again. Hey, y'all, so I encourage this. Put it out there and do this and be a part of that and bring this into your life. Don't just, one of the things listening to podcasts or listening to their stories, I always hear kind of like the fun's over there.
Right.
It sure would be neat, right, to be over there with all that good stuff. I'm telling you, even if it's not with Larry or Jim or Kate, find your Larry, Jim, or Kate.
Yeah, because you have one.
They're out there.
You have one. Yeah.
And if you can't find them, I mean, even if it means finding them, I don't want. They're out there. If you connect with them, I mean, if that comes on your heart and you reach out, as long as it's not like a stalky, crazy kind of thing. Sure. But I think you understand what I'm getting at in terms of find somebody to talk to and have your conversation at the table.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, if you do, look, not that we're doing this all for attention, but I would love to know if this is resonating. I'd love to know if you have your moment. I'd love to know if this is something that's making you think as well. We want to hear from you. Even if it's just through email, I will respond. I got it on my phone every day. When I get to it, I will, or I'll respond. And if you have any things for Doug, I'm sure I can get a hold of your email.
He does.
I can shoot you that way if you want to hear from what Doug has to say. Anybody, let me know, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, man. As you know, we wrap this up, but I'm gonna defer and let you close us out with a little prayer, my friend.
All right,
we'll
man.
go from there.
Awesome.
Right.
God, we thank you so much for how you are blessing this podcast and how you are bringing together people that we believe you have made in your image, and we just ask that you continue to bless Sean and his efforts to demonstrate the love of your son Jesus through conversations and this thing called a podcast. We ask that you are with the previous guests, that you are with the future guests as well, that you continue to bless them in their journeys. And God, we thank you for the hope found in Jesus. And we just ask that you, like I said, continue to bless this podcast, bless Sean, bless his family, and all that he's got going on. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, God, that ultimately we believe that you have invited us to your table, and that's because of your grace and your mercy. So we thank you for it, and we pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
So there you go. We're going to, typical things, we'd love to subscribe. You can find us. We now have a new email address. We're official.
Whoa.
Sean at theComeToTheTablePodcast.com.
Come on.
Because we have a website now, theComeToTheTablePodcast.com. You can actually find all of the episodes will be embedded there. Not only that, but we have been learning. We've been learning about podcasts.
Yeah.
Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, Castbox. I'm getting on Spotify.
Come on.
iHeartRadio. They're all over. There's all these different mediums. iTunes, of course, and Google Play, the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's hot links there. You can click on there and find it, whatever medium it is that you want to listen to it. We're trying to put us in as many different places as we can to get to you and allow you to share this with not only others, but find it in any capacity you can for you to listen. We're on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group now. We started that.
Okay, cool.
The idea that you could maybe come to a little kind of a mini table online in the group, come in there and share.
Yeah.
It's all part of the process. And then, of course, just reach out, email. However, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Here we go. First one down. Looking forward to the next one. This was fun.
Yeah, man. It's a good time. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Take care. God bless.
Thank you so much for listening to the Come to the Table podcast. As always, we hope our conversations inspire you to invite someone you know and love to the table to have an open, loving, and respectful discussion, maybe even a difficult one. If that happens, we'd be honored if you would contact us about it so we could share it. Thanks again.
And God bless everyone.